Good morning, my dear friends and my dear students. Today we are going to continue the lesson Intellectual Awakening and Socio-Political Changes. I hope you can recall and remember the classes that we went through. We talked about the great intellectuals. We talked about Zoroaster, Confucius, we talked about Buddha, we talked about various other intellectual people who brought about some of the changes in the society. Today we are going to talk about, in the same 6th century, the kingdoms that emerged, which came to the power, which came to the proper ruling. It is the second part, more or less, of political changes which came about in the 6th century. To start with, we will go about the rise of kingdoms. In the 6th century BC, witnessed a establishment of various kingdoms, the systematic way of oligarchies, under the leadership of chiefdoms, and in the same 6th century saw the emergence of towns. From the largest chiefdoms, there emerged various kingdoms. So this is what the birth of the kingdoms were. So first, to start with, the chieftains, a small clan under leadership. Then it developed into a leadership under so many other clans, that is called as chiefdoms, and that developed into a kingdom. So this is what origin or the birth of the kingdoms. As we talked about the many tribes of Rig Vedic period, it rose into the prominence, came to the full emergence or powerful. For example, Bharatas, Pasus, Trithos, Turvasas are some of the various tribes which were mentioned in the Rig Vedic. And according to the Buddhist text, there were 16 Mahajanapadas that is mentioned in the Buddhist text. According to it, the different social and cultural groups existed, cultural groups lived together in Mahajanapadas, whereas a linguistic and the cultural harmony, unity prevailed in the Janapadas. So which means there was Janapadas as well as Mahajanapadas. Mahajanapadas had a different cultural and linguistic basis, whereas Janapadas had a unity, harmony in both the linguistic as well as in the cultural basis. With the emergence of all these kingdoms, the kingdoms, when it started to emerge, the struggle for supremacy, the struggle for the power, different states occurred frequently. Between 2-3 towns and states, they started to fight against each other to show their power. Sacrifices also were followed. For example, such as Rajasuya, Ashwamedha, they all were performed to signify the imperial sway of monarchies over their rivals, over the enemies. So these types of talk about the sacrifice or the rituals were followed to show their power over the enemies, their rivals. At the same time, the Rig Vedic title, normally they called as a king, another name Raja, Rajan, was replaced by the impressive titles at Samrat, Ekrat, Virat, Bhoja. So these are the other titles given to these Rajan, okay, which is given in the Rig Vedic text. We can talk about this is the title for the king. So these are the different names were given. These kingdoms, this power grown very well. So what is the growth of the royal power at this 6th century? The kings enjoyed absolute power, no other power than the king. Only one powerful is the king. And sabhas of the Rig Vedic period started to stop and the existence stopped. So during this 6th century, the king sought the aid and support of Samiti. We call it Samiti, is a group on matters like war, peace and fiscal policies. Various other, the king sought the help of this particular group, a movement we call as Samiti. However, in spite of the existence of these assemblies, the power of the king kept increasing. King never came down. He was always powerful. He was not punishable. He was not judgment to any crime or anything. He was so powerful. According to the Brahmin description, the king as infallible, king as immune, king as non-dependable from all punishments. The growth of royal power was reflected, shown in the enlarged administrative structure. How we can know the growth of this kingdom, growth of the power of this king through the administrative structure. So when you talk about the administrative structure, king was now assisted by a group of people, the officers. There are so many things are listed. Some of them we will see. That is the Buguduga, the collectors of taxes, Sutta, the charioteers, the Akshapara, the superintendent of gambling. So there are so many other types of administrative structure which assisted the king. With that, king was becoming very powerful. In addition to those groups of people, there were the ecclesiastical, the supreme and the military officials also existed, like Prohita, we know it is a chaplain. In addition, there were ecclesiastical and the military officers like Prohita, that is called as the Prohit chaplain. And we also had a Sinai army general. They have also had the post. And the Gramini, leader of the village, had its own position and he had his own power. And it was all linked, linked together through the royal authority which was enforced in a village. The king administered the justice and occasionally delegated his judicial power to the adhyakas, that is, a royal officials, to reduce his own power, to reduce his own tension. He also appointed a particular royal officials and asked them to maintain mainly the judicial power. In the village, today also we call it as the Gramam, that is a Gramya Vadin, village judge. We also call as a Natame, Panchayat, who does the Panchayat in the villages. And the Sabha, which is a court, Sabha means a court, decided the various cases which took place in the village and also given the punishments for the crimes which were very, very, very severe. So these all were maintained in the particular time. To go about a particular kingdom which existed at the time, we talk about various types of Magda, Mauryan kingdom which existed during the 6th century. So we are going to have just a glance at these two kingdoms. To go about the first one, the Magda kingdom. It was different from the Ghana Sangha. When you talk about the kingdoms, which is different from Ghana Sangha, and it had this Magda kingdom had the polity, a systematic rule which was followed in these kingdoms. The political power of this Magda kingdom was concentrated in the ruling family. Mainly it was a family which was ruling. It became a dynasty. So ruling families became a dynasty ruled by a particular clan. It was succession becoming a hereditary. Father and his son and his son, so grandson. So it became a hereditary in ruling. So which was a family rule became a dynasty and became a hereditary, ruled by a same family. And there was adversary bodies. These rule, the powerful kingdom had the different bodies. We call it as parishad, the ministers, and also had a sabha. Already we talked about what means a sabha, a court, a adversary council. This sabha collected the revenue and remitted to its own treasury of the kingdom. And this treasury was given back, were redistributed for the public expenses, mainly for the maintenance of the army, the salaries to be for the state officials. They used it. So this was the main function of this Magda Kingdom. Of the kingdoms mentioned in the literature of the period, particular period of 6th century, mainly the Kashi, Koshala, Magada, and they are the major, considered to be the powerful kingdoms. To talk about the Magada kingdom of these three, Bimbisara was the first important king of Magada. Even before Bimbisara, there might have been the kings existed, but who became very famous and powerful was Bimbisara. So first important king of Magada. Through the matrimonial alliance. What is the matrimonial alliance? By marrying the daughter of another king. So both the kingdoms becoming having a relation, alliance. So through the matrimonial alliance with the high status Lichvi clan, of which is Vaishali, the ruling family in Koshala, Bimbisara went on to conquer various other kingdoms. Anga in west, which is today it is called as the West Bengal. Thereby he gained access to the Ganges Delta. So this is how he started to conquer various other kingdoms. To talk about Bimbisara, he succeeded in establishing a comprehensive structure of administration. There was a village administration. This village administration, which we call as the Gramini, had a headman. And this headman started collecting various taxes to develop these villages. For example, Bali, which is called as the land tax. It was the main source of the kingdom and mainly of the villages. And thus, this called as a peasant economy came into being at the Magada kingdom. The Ajatasashtru, who was the son of Bimbisara, he murdered his father Bimbisara and he came to power in the year 493 BC. And he also continued his own father's policy, and various ways he built up the kingdom and grew for the growth of the kingdom. And afterwards, he had established so many other capitals because his kingdom grew rich and richer. So he started to develop the capitals in different places, treasury, stored the wealth in different places, and he flourished more and more. Ajatasashtru died in the year 461 BC, and he was succeeded by 5 kings. And all of them followed the policy or the systematic method, the example of this Ajatasashtru. What was his policy? He came to power by killing his father. His followers, the 5 of them, followed the same method. Everyone killed their father and then came to power. So it became, for example, it became a style, it became a tradition, like killing their father, they coming to the power. So it was the time which is followed at the time of Ajatasashtru. And various other kings, the ruling nearly for half a century, and we talk about Shikuna dynasty, lost the kingdom to the Mahapadma Nanda, who founded the Nanda dynasty. The Nandas were the first of the non-Kshatriya dynasties to rule in the North India. So after the decline of Magadha Empire, this Nanda dynasty started to flourish more and more. So this is what we can have a little knowledge about Magadha Empire kingdom. To go about the another kingdom which is very famous is the Mauryan Empire. Mauryan state and the society we are going to talk about. To first start with, we will talk about the kings, Mauryan kings. Vishnugupta, who was later known as the Chanakya, or we can also call as a Kaushalya, was fell out with the Nanda king. We talked about the North India which flourished. He fell out of the Nanda king and vowed to dethrone him, remove him from the power. So Chandragupta, he inspired by the Alexander of Macedonia. So when he heard about the death of Alexander, so he started to move towards and conquer various other kingdoms. So during the reign of Chandragupta, Seleucus, the general of Alexander, had become the control over the countries from Asia Minor to India, crossed the Indus only to be defeated by Chandragupta. So this is what we can talk about in the history. After gaining the control over the Gangetic plain, Chandragupta turned his attention toward the northwest to take advantage of the created by Alexander's demise. Alexander's powerful armies and that. So these areas comprising the present day, today we call it as Afghanistan, Balochistan, Makran, which are surrendered without any resistance. So they continued to grow up. So thus Chandragupta moved to central India. So from the west, so he moved towards the central India. According to Jain's Jinna tradition, towards the end of his life, whose life? Chandragupta's life, had by now became an ardent followers of Jainism. So according to all this Jainism tradition, this Chandragupta became the follower of this particular religion called Jainism. He abdicated his throne in favor of his son Bindusara. So he given his Bindusara his son, and he came to the power. So to have some idea about this Bindusara, the son of Chandragupta, succeeded in extending the Mauryan Empire up to Karnataka to the south. So from the west he moved towards the north. From north he is coming towards south to Karnataka. At the time of his death, a large part of subcontinent had come under Mauryan, the empire, which is called a subcontinent. India is called as a subcontinent. We learnt in geography. So most of the large part of the Indian subcontinent came under this Mauryan dynasty. When Ashoka succeeded Bindusara in 268 BC, he desirous of bringing the remaining part of South India into his own empire. At the same time, Ashoka waged a war against the Kalinga in the 8th year of his reign, when they were in the 8th year of their rule. The people of Kalinga fought bravely, but they were defeated after large-scale slaughter. When most of the people were killed, large slaughter had taken place, they lost their own power. This slaughter affected Ashoka so much that he decided to give up the war. He said that he will never fight. He will no more fight against any one of them. Thus Ashoka became an ardent Buddhist after meeting a Buddhist monk, Upagupta, and pronounced his dharma. And he gave himself completely to dharma. Only a true conquest, what he proclaimed is a conquest of self. and the conquest of men's heart, the love of others by dharma, according to Pali. The dharma, which is in Sanskrit, the same thing, dhamma in Pali. So he was taken up by the teachings of Buddhists and he gave himself for it. They were carved out in the rock, where we can find all this, that he has said this, he has followed all this, which are carved out in the rocks, and we can have some proof, evidence. One of his Kalinga edicts, he tells us his horror and sorrow over the deaths which the war conquers caused. So now we are going about the Mauryan, one of the emperor, the king, that is, okay, we talk about the particular king. He, by the religious movement of Buddhism, how he brings about his own ideas and knowledge, he talks about his own feelings. His another edict talks about, it make known that Ashoka would not tolerate any longer the death or captivity of even 100th or the 1000th part of the number killed, and made the captive Kalinga. So he was not happy about, he was not willing of capturing or the death of the Kalinga rule. Thus, Ashoka's passion for protecting life extended even to animal. So he did not stop with having love for human being, having love for the people. At the same time, he extended towards even to the animals, not killing, not hurting the animals. The hospitals were constructed for them, and the animal sacrifice was forbidden because he was a strict follower of Buddhism. So he stopped these types of sacrifice. He was against so-called the sacrifices. Ashoka sent his son Mahendra and his daughter to Shillong to spread this message of Dharma, this message of Dhamma to even Shillong. And it is said Ashoka died after ruling for 38 years. So these are the knowledges we can have when we talk about the Mauryan rule, the power. The national emblem with the 4 lions is a replica, is a resemblance where we got of the Ashoka pillar. So even we can talk about his contribution towards our nation. So what was for his own power, his own title, his own powerful way of life he has brought about. We can talk about the Ashoka pillar of Sarnath. We have it that. When you talk about this Mauryan administration, what are the types of methodology he had, the ruling? When you talk about this, is the earliest undertook some measures that were positive for the development of the society. So mainly they concentrated on the society. They raised various types of taxes to finance a huge standing army and the vast bureaucracy, because there are 2 types of rule that they had. So to manage all the balances, they used these types of taxes. And they had efficient types of governments by various types of administration. According to his king as the head, and he was assisted by the council of ministers. We talk about there were Mahamantriyas. Mantriyas means the ministers. They are also called as Mahamantriyas. They function as secretaries to the ministers. They also assisted to the ministers. When you talk about these taxes, revenue and the expenditure was samhatra. So they followed a different method. And their kingdom, to talk about administration, it was divided into 4 provinces. These provinces were administered by the governor. So kingdom divided into 4 provinces, and each province had a governor to rule over the particular empire. And these provinces were divided into various districts. Okay, this is how the royal family, the Mauryan administration followed. And they also had 6 committees with the 5 members each carried on their duties under the so-called the municipal. Today we call as the municipal. At the same time, it was under a leadership, the 5 members, okay, all of them followed. What is their major role? They have to take care of the foreigners, they register the birth, death of the citizens, look after the trade and commerce which is bought and sold to various other kingdoms. They have to supervise different manufacturers, what are the products which are made in their own particular areas, they have to supervise about that. They have to collect and exercise duties and custom duties. So these are the major functions of this particular the municipal administration. So they have to follow all this methodology. Likewise, the city or the town administration also was developed. The military department was also managed by a board of 30 members. So it was split into 6 committees with the 5 members in each of them, and it developed at the level of village and their Gramini. So they followed a systematic way of administration. To talk about the state which used the surplus appropriated for the development of the rural economy by founding a new settlements that we call as the granting land and encouraging the people to settle as a farmers, because very important is the cultivation. So they all encouraged cultivation and various other products. The state control of agriculture, they had other activities like mining, industries and the trade. So they all were very much involved in various activities. The days discouraged the emergence of private property. That became another problem for the state, because the private property, when they emerge, the state will be fall down, okay, in the economical level. So economic status will fall down. So because of that, they discouraged the emergence of private property and the land and its sale to the private owners. The Mauryan state gave further boost to the urban development, but it supported to the urban development. And we talk about the other topic is the educational centers also were brought up by the Mauryan Empire. The monasteries and the temples, which became the center of the society or the city, developed more and more, became a center, and the major purpose of imparting education. The monks lived in the particular place which is called as the monasteries. People all went for worshipping a particular place called temple. These two centers became a major place, a center place for giving knowledge, imparting education to the people. Nalanda was a great monastery built by the Magda Empire. When you talk about the early kingdom, Magda Empire, the Nalanda was one of the so-called the place monastery which was built for imparting education. Among the educational centers offered Buddhist and Vedic literature, logic, we can talk about a system of philosophy, and also grammar, various languages grammar. It also taught them a medicine, okay, various types of Ayurvedic system, various types of medicines are also were taught and given, distributed, and also they taught the astronomy, how to calculate the so-called the climate and weather, what is going to happen by looking at the sky, various stars and various other symptoms. Even the science of war was taught, how to fight, different method of protecting us, everything was taught in this particular education system. So Nalanda became the most renowned seat of the learning in the course of time. In the particular time, it was developed more and more. It was supported by the revenues of 100 villages. The 100 villages, what the taxes they collected, they boost up this Nalanda Education Center to develop more and more, to impart knowledge, education to the people around. No fees was charged for the people who had the education in the particular Nalanda institution. The students, and they were provided free board and lodging. They all stayed there, and for that it was all completely free. So these are the system of method of having the knowledge towards the people. How the kingdom, how the empire not only developed itself, not only grown itself by enlarging the kingdom, but it supported, developed the people in various other fields. Yes, my dear friends, the 6th century intellectual awakening tells us to have some knowledge not only of our family, of our society. It is not only telling us to develop our own self, it is also to teach others to develop their self. The administrative purpose, the political purpose, which we talked about in the second session today, it tells us the way of ruling the people. In the history we have seen, the king who have conquered a vast region, they had nothing. They lost everything because of their supremacy. The king who encouraged the people, who loved the people, they lived long happily with their small kingdoms. Yes, we also should learn the political method of ruling. So in the future, you may also become a politician or various other power. So we should learn some concepts from this lesson from our past kings and kingdoms and the empire. Thus, we conclude our session and learn for our life. Thank you.